Sorry about this misunderstanding. I hope that talking about misconduct and research integrity won't be a problem talking about quantification. Well, I prepared for this conference a tentative paper with someone who's called Ghislaine Filiatro, which some of you may know, who used to be the head of the Observatory of Science and Technology Indicators in France, and who is now the integrity officer at INSERM, INSERM being the Institute for Health and Biology Medical Studies. So it's interesting because thanks to Ghislaine, we have access to ongoing problems within the Institute regarding issues of integrity. So I would like, of course, being a sociologist, to treat scientific integrity as a social construct. And my questions are the fact that there is a rising concern about misconduct. The question is, how much is this concern based? How much is misconduct real? And how to understand this rising concern? It follows very much your presentation. The hypotheses with which we have been working is are the following. The current race to quantitative performance-based assessment impacts the organization of work and the allocation of rewards in science, alters the incremental adjustments in the daily life of the labs, that's very important, and weakens collegial cohesion. And whatever the outrageous misconducts we can meet, and we meet quite a lot, the concern about misconduct is less about integrity violation, big integrity violations, than to the erosion of scientific self-control. So we work on the field of biomedicine. I'm going to generalize the conclusions we make on this field. It's a very hot field in terms of health, of course, in terms of environment too. And it's supposed to be the field in which you meet the largest number of misconducts nowadays. We have been working in a panel of lab case studies or individual case studies at INSERM, this institute, and also drawing from the Office of Research Integrity in the United States, drawing from various universities like ETHZ in Switzerland. So what is research misconduct? First of all, research misconduct is not a new feature in science. You know, we have very famous examples with Mendel, for instance, and the laws of heredity. We have examples with Pasteur. We have examples with very famous scientists. And what's funny with these examples is that they have been recognized as misconducts in terms of methodologies, but at the end of the day, what people say is that, okay, they were wrong, Mendel arranged his data, erased the dots which didn't fit his theory, and he admitted it himself. But he had a very good theory, and the theory works. So he is excused for this misconduct because he has developed a cutting-edge new theory. So it's not a new feature. What we observe, or what we are supposed to observe, is the rise of misconduct defined, everybody agrees worldwide on this large definition, like PPF, this means it's FFP. It means falsification of data, fabrication of data, and plagiarism. Okay, so the issue, of course, is to know whether this idea that misconduct increases is an effect of the temperature or is an effect of the thermometer of the concern itself. Of course, it's difficult to answer this question because by construction, you only know about the misconducts which you detect. Smart misconducts are not detectable or difficult. For instance, in biomedicine, most of the experiments are not, the primary data are not stored in such a way that it's very difficult to go back to these primary data to replicate experiments. It's also difficult to test for reproducibility because there is so many variables in life sciences that impact the conditions of experiment that you can very well make an experiment yourself, redo it a second time, and not reproduce the same results. Okay? So it's very difficult to tell whether a result which is not reproduced is not reproducible because there has been either an error or a voluntary manipulation. So we come to say that the number of misconducts remains low. I will give you a few numbers. But these numbers don't mean much. It's probably largely undervalued. It's also supposed to touch some disciplines more than others. I was talking about biology, about med science in particular. Well, I must add to start with that misconducts are not only falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. And I would say that it's the heart of a large number of problems. When you talk with rank and file researchers, they report many unethical behaviors around them, but they are reluctant to disclose them because it's not efficient to disclose, and it's difficult to as colleagues and friends. But what has been added those days to the three types of misconducts are what has been called by the National Academy of Science in the US questionable practices, which is all the rest. Okay. So a few numbers about research misconduct. But when talking about retraction of papers, because either of error or of misconduct itself, in the US, they evaluate the percentage to 0.02%. That's about most publications. When you look at that's an old figure, 2004, but it hasn't changed that much. The Max Planck Gesellschaft has dealt with 22 cases over 5 years before 2004. It's about nothing. From 2002 to 2015, the Office of Research Integrity in the US imposed 62 sanctions. It's not much either. Regarding reproducibility, over 70% of researchers in the survey have been report that they have been unable to reproduce a colleague's experiment, and over half of them say that they have been unable to reproduce their own experiments. The evaluation of fraudsters varies from 1% to 35%, according to another research. There is a lot of literature on that, and more in science, I would say. There was an audit on the years 77-90 by FDA, which said that between 10 and 20% of papers showed important defects, and 2% appeared clearly fraudulent, and about 2% of researchers admitted that they had at least once fabricated, falsified, or arranged the data of the results, and 34% that they have had other questionable practices. So it's a very common behavior. Regarding colleagues, 40% of the interviewee mentioned that colleagues, they know of colleagues having falsified, and 72% that colleagues have practiced questionable ways of making research. So how can you, what are all these misconducts? How can you cheat the system? Specifically, of course, it will vary according to the type of field in which you are. Regarding med sciences, where you use a lot of graphs and pictures, you can embellish graphics by erasing disturbing points, or just by making nicer pictures. You are tempted to do that even more because your journals in which you publish ask you to show clear results, okay? You can also, of course, remove that slice results, multiple publications. You can forget methodological requirements to outpace competition because you have to be the first, okay? So you will replicate your experiment 1 time or 2 times instead of doing it 3, 4, 5 times. You can supply dubious preliminary results when you apply to a grant, because you don't have time afterwards to correct these results. You can, of course, prioritize topics of interest for funders, which is not a misconduct in terms of methodology, but which is maybe a misconduct in terms of relationship to science. You can hold back results which might disturb sponsors. You can also hold back results which might interest your competitors. You can apply for like patents, which will give you an additional patent which you know is useless. You can build uninteresting experiments that will nevertheless afford you a reputation. You can offer a good signature to a prestigious researcher who only had a very small contribution to the paper. You can deny signature to, I said that already. You can also exert sabotage, that is managed in such a way that your results cannot be used by people who would like to use them to go on in their own research. And also the issue of incompetence has been recognized by the NAS as a questionable practice, that is to produce results with methodologies you don't master. Okay, the list would be much longer, and the Open Science Foundation has developed a project with integrity officers and journals in order to build a kind of checklist of all possible misconducts. But of course, misconducts are innumerable, so it's a vague enterprise to list all the possibilities you have to cheat the system. So the interesting point is that misconduct has become a public problem, and that's rather recent. The 80s is an old period for most of the people in the room, but for people of age, the 80s are not so far away. In the 80s, there is a few scandals which are detected in the US, and it leads to the creation of the Office of Science Integrity at the Department of Health and Human Services. These offices of science integrity, one way or another, will develop all over after the 2000s, and especially after the 2010. In Europe, most universities nowadays have integrity officers. In many countries, it's compulsory to have integrity officers. Of course, public research organizations such as Max-Planck-Gesellschaft, CNRS, and so on and so forth have ethical charts and integrity officers. International institutions have developed charts and conferences and papers on integrity. There are yearly or almost yearly conferences on research integrity. In Singapore, in 2010, was adopted the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity, which is supposed to provide a general landscape of what integrity is. It's very general. It's of no help for action. But it's very interesting because at this conference, this conference gathered researchers, research administrators, research sponsors, journal editors, and other stakeholders of this issue of research integrity. The publishers themselves have been for a long time interested into, of course, into research integrity. They have published the recommendations of Vancouver after one of their conferences of one of their groups, and they have defined what it is to be an author, because in these issues of misconducts, one important problem is the question of signature. Many misconducts are detected because people who pretend to be on the list of signatures are forgotten, for instance, are put in a position which is not the one they think they deserve. So they have defined what it is to be an author, and we define it by 4 activities: play one's part in the design of the project and the conduct of experiments and the analysis of results, help draft or revise the manuscript, approve the final version for publication, and thus accept accountability for the whole content of the article. When this Ioannidis, who makes a very interesting meta survey on integrity, has written an interesting paper about authors who publish more than 1 paper every 5 days. There is a lot of people in the world. He has located, using the Web of Science, probably, or another database. He has identified quite a lot of them, and he sent them a survey. A small but significant percentage of them answered this survey, and all of them admitted that they did not comply with these definitions of being an author. It's not a surprise when you sign more than 1 paper every 5 days. Also, whistleblowers and social networks have entered the game with sites such as Peer, who have developed post-publication review of papers, mostly in biology, leading to cases in institutions. Retraction Watch, which has also made lots of retractions, and people who have the vocation, the mission of Russian writer, such as Elizabeth Wick, who is a biologist at the University of, who was at the University of Stanford, I guess, and who has become one of the most famous persons in the world working on the issue of especially embellishment and replication of figures and pictures in scientific articles. And she has a big problem at the moment because she has shown that General Cao, who is a very respected scientist in China, has quite a lot of errors in his papers, which might be misconducts. It's maybe dangerous, including physically, to denounce such important people in such a country. Okay, so you see that all kinds of institutions, people have been going into this issue of misconduct without really knowing what's the extent of the phenomenon. So theories have been developed on this problem. The easiest one is the theory of rotten apple, of course. People who have no morality, who are not respectful of science, and you have to sanction them one way or another. It's more or less what all these integrity officers and integrity officers do. They will discover, detect a case of misconduct, and they will develop committees, examine very seriously, most of the time very seriously, all the papers, and pronounce sanctions, which are not compulsory, yes, which are compulsory at the level of the institution, such as they will forbid the person who has not respected integrity to supervise alone doctoral students for a certain period of time. They will do the same for building experiments. All the experiments will be verified by another person and so on. Of course, it's an easy way to approach the problem, but of course, it can save the appearances, I would say. It's important to do it, but the problem comes more from the systemic effects of what has been changing into the ways of producing, evaluating science. So the systemic interpretations in which I, of course, am part of, rest on the following propositions. Competition has become a principle of organizational governance. I don't go back to that, but the cycle between incentives, performance, evaluation, and allocation has been developing in most countries, more or less, and more or less according to various disciplines. This has led to segmentation of roles and work in project teams. This has increased the pressure of time for development of project-based research. Signatures and patterns have become the principal indicators of performance as far as the issue, the question of allocation is concerned. This organization of labor focuses on leaders, principal investigators in winner-take-all type markets, and this generates more unfairness and frustration than it did before. Behind that, behind this analysis, of course, and I don't go back to that because we've been talking extensively about that, is the issue of how you judge the quality of projects, of results, and so on. With these two types of judgment, reputation, which is a mode of evaluation based on endogenous judgment of the peers, in particular, which is contingent to the context, which is local, which is contextual in the lab, in the discipline, in the university. The source of judgment is colleagues, peers. Colleagues are both judges and juries. The type of evaluation is holistic, informal, cardinal, subjective. What you look after is originality, singularity of what has been produced. And what matters is originality, talent, promises for the future, contribution to the advancement of knowledge. When you evaluate performance, quality, through performance, you use exogenous, contextual measurements in an impersonal way. So you co-measure. Your measure is analytic, it's formalized, ordinal, and objective. So what matters is your number of outputs, publications, patents, citations, and so on. Whatever you publish and patent and so on. But if you go into the research lab and ask researchers, what they actually complain about in their everyday work life, what they answer you is not that they are worried by big scandals. Of course, it happened. Of course, they shouldn't. Of course, people who provoke scandals should be sanctioned. But they complain about all these misbehaviors that are part of the ordinary life of researchers in a local environment. They complain nowadays about how to behave in gray zones of everyday research life. In other ways, they complain about having no frame to make decisions anymore. In certain research labs, to have no frames, which they might have in other labs. These gray zones cover a large number of issues. The meaning of data first. When are my data correct? When can I work with my data? Considering the fact that I have produced them in a way which I've produced them in the field of life sciences where data are unstable. They complain about the rules and procedures that crowd their everyday life. They complain about how to behave with their colleagues, and they complain about the pressure to production of science. So what is misbehavior when you consider it that way? I would define misbehavior as an adaptive process to adapt to formal rules, the ones which are given by the institution, which are given by the national research agencies and so on. So to adapt to formal rules with endogenous constraints in concrete action. In everyday life, you meet constraints, and formal rules don't help to find what to do. So this adaptive process helps living with the uncertainties of the work, which arises naturally when building and interpreting data, responding to tools, meeting with colleagues, and establishing oneself as a professional scientist. So on the one side, you have formal rules. These formal rules are different natures. They are methodological, they are managerial, they are social. But these formal rules cannot frame all concrete situations and provide solutions for each problem. It's not something which is specific to scientists. It's true in any work environment. Formal rules require interpretation. But of course, the issue is who builds the interpretation and who has the legitimacy to control it. Is it the individual researcher? Is it the community, if ever there is a community, or the communities, because you develop indigenous rules at the level of the lab, but also discipline, but also the institutions, and they don't always fit well with each other, so there is a lot of work to try to adjust, which is a work well known from people working in law. So when there is a stable community, such an interpretation may crystallize into endogenous rules. These rules are informal, they are tacit, they are built incrementally and in interaction with formal rules. They are learned by and embodied by local socialization processes, and they frame acceptable and proper behaviors. In other words, in a specific situation, you will be sure that you can do that. Everybody, you don't even have to ask your colleagues, your boss, yeah, you can do it because otherwise it's not done in real life. In other cases, at the other extremity, there are cases which are really problematic and they require conversation. What do we do in such a circumstance? How do we adjust? Okay? Where the possibility to develop endogenous rules exists, I would say that these endogenous rules cover normal misbehaviors, which are misbehaviors in terms of formal rules, but which are normal behaviors in terms of endogenous rules. So now I will contrast two types of labs. First type, the integrated research lab. I will you that I remind you that we are talking about experimental science, in which there is lots of interdependencies with facilities, with different people in the research team. In the integrated lab type, you have a labor force which is made of tenured or tenured to be researchers, according to the rule up or out. You have basic funding, at least large part of basic funding. You have thus a collegial, durable community of peers. The boss in such a boss, the patron, the head is a role model, or has to be a role model, which means that he is the one who takes care of having the doctoral and postdoctoral students grown, who takes care of having the endogenous rules respected, who takes care of organizing the lab, and who is legitimate to do that, because there is a community, but also because he's the master of a research agenda, which is the basis for the organization of work in the lab and the distributions of topics, for instance, for doctoral students. is also the one who takes care of capitalizing knowledge which comes from the mobility. For instance, he organizes of his doctoral students with his colleagues. And he's the one who, through conversations at various levels within the lab, conversation is very important, conversation on results, conversation on the rules, but also conversation with the community at large in the discipline, which is meant to keep the research agenda under control over time. In such a social construct, we knew quite often some decades ago, which we still know in several places, in several circumstances, there is a coherence between individual and collective interests. Individuals have interest to collaborate to the well-being of the whole community, because the community reciprocally brings in or her resources and an environment of work which is precious. In such an environment, there is quite a lot of flexibility, because to organize work, you are always in a hurry in a research lab in which you want to get results before the competitors, for instance. The flexibility relates to the fact that you exchange within the research lab. You help each other, you give and you receive. There is reciprocity of gifts and counter gifts over time. For instance, a doctoral student is due to finish his doctoral thesis in 3 years nowadays in France and in some countries. If he fails with one of his or her experiments because the mice used don't work, he has done the work. He's a good doctoral student. He owes to receive his doctorate. You will then help him publish the 2 papers which are required by giving him or her the results of an experiment which is stopped into the research center to comply with the requirements of thesis. You can do that because you are together over time, and this person will reciprocate one way or another. So, such a community works with trust. Trust is a major asset in such research labs. Fairness is a very important issue. You have to be fair to the other members, and cooperation, of course. So, and social exchange is something very important to follow what's going on in terms of science and in terms of life of the lab, and to exert collective control. In such circumstances, normal misbehavior can occur under the control of the local community, as I said. When we are in a research center where quantified performance-based evaluation has become the main target, it may generate envy. It's often the case in project-based organizations where the lab becomes the sum of temporary projects involving insiders and outsiders. The system up or out is replaced by the system insider and outsiders. On the one side, you have PIs with tenure. PIs are assemblers, they are entrepreneurs, which job is to catch resources and to deliver output. you have mostly, you may have a few technicians and non-publishing researchers, but mostly you have doctoral students and postdoctorates who are on short-term contracts. And you don't have the durability anymore, which allows for flexibility. You have deadlines. Your life is built around deadlines because at the end of the contract you have to deliver results. And sometimes, and many times, the time to publication is longer than the time to the end of the contract of doctoral and postdoc students. So there is a lot of conflicts around this issue. I'm not in the lab anymore, but I have been participating to such and such research. I ask my name to be in first, second, third position in the paper. Because you have the issue of signing, not signing, and then you have the issue of signing in a good position or in a position which is not that good. And of course, this is the only asset of postdoc when he moves from one postdoc to the other, since the development of project-based organization plus the overflow of qualified postdoctoral individuals is such that they are moving as precarious intellectual or something like that across various positions, across various labs with the same positions, without improving their competencies, because they just know a small part of the project under control of the PI. So being a postdoc for a long time dequalifies and is a bad signal for applying in permanent positions. So what's the target? The target is to deal with time. Time is at the center of life, much more than ever. Time is scarce. And to deal with time in order to get results, in order to get resources. So shared interests in the lab decrease, conversations become poorer and poorer. The ability to control collectively what's going on in the lab, in the life of each of the researchers decreases, mutual obligations weaken, and the floor is open for individual adaptation to the constants in terms of misbehavior. Endogenious rules regress, interpretation is left to individual resources, so there is no more internal legitimate party to control it. Researchers come to complain about gray zones. They don't know how to behave, and they have no one or no community to refer to decide. And of course, they may be out of control when they purposefully and skillfully cheat the rules to improve their performance. The external formal controls may sanction the misconducts that are detected. For sure, they build a new normativity by privileging certain misconducts, the ones which you can more easily detect with the famous FFP. But they miss what is the center, not the center, what is the most problematic issue within research lab, which is the development of these questionable practices, either in order to cheat the rule or in order to deal with problems you have in your everyday life. To conclude, what I've been talking about is, as you understood, the impact of organization and governance on the issue of misconduct in that case. I've been identifying two ideal types, the integrated lab on the one side, the anomic lab on the other one. Of course, this shouldn't be understood as the description of a linear evolution which would lead from the integrated to the anomic lab. There is integrated labs today. There is anomic labs today, and the positioning of labs and institutions on this opposition, integration and anomic, vary according to how much these labs are dependent from competitive external resources. This has to do, of course, with the institutions themselves. This has to do with the provision of resources by public authorities. This has to do with the issue of how much performance evaluation is important in the country institutions. And the positioning of the lab varies according to their strategic capacity to deal with these two dimensions of being living together to make research. On the one side, catching resources, using the opportunities of the performance-based system, and on the other side, allocating resources in order to go on research agendas which are largely sacrificed by the development of the rush to good positions in on the metrics of performance. Thank you.